Let's talk about learning to love again. You know, there is a intentionality, a depth, a other-centered nature of love that can be lost sight of if we don't pay attention to exactly what love means in the spaces that we find ourselves. The book of Revelations opens up with Jesus speaking to 7 churches through the Apostle John. And he starts first with the church of Ephesians. And with the church of Ephesians, he speaks in nothing but glowing terms. He loves them. He says, I love the way you love me. I love the way you love the gospel. I love the way you protect the church. I love the way you fight people who are trying to corrupt it. And you keep away from evil doers. He speaks in just glowing term after glowing term. But then he turns around and says something strange. He says, but I have one thing against you. He said, you've lost your first love. Now, when you first read what Jesus is saying, you assume that Jesus is saying to them, you've lost your first love for me. But then you become even more confused because you're saying, hold on, but you've already told them that you're commending them for the way in which they love you. It's not until you go to the book of Ephesians that you understand what Jesus is saying. You understand who Jesus is referring to when Jesus says, you've lost your first love. Because in the book of Ephesians, you read the story of Paul in the church of Ephesus, where he spent 3.5 years. And in that 3.5 years he was in that community with them, he was reminding them that they are to be rooted and grounded in love. He was reminding them that they are to remember that they are members of each other, that they are to be imitators of Christ, that they are to be responsible for their brother and their sister. They are to speak words that only build each other up. They are to learn to live in love. They are to learn to forgive them each other. And this is the more and more you read it, the more it becomes apparent that while they may have started that way, somewhere along the line, the first love they had for each other became abandoned. Somewhere along the line, that was replaced by a different type of love altogether. They continued to love God, and they continued to love and protect the institution of the church. But they loved the institution of the church so much, they loved the things of God so much, that they left no room in order to love each other. They left no space to love each other. I mean, can it be that we become so absorbed with the things of God that we make no room for the people that God has died for? Could it be that we become so enamored and absorbed with the idea of having a family that we leave no space to love the people in that family? Can it be that we become so desperate with the idea of marriage that we forget that it actually takes love to make that marriage work? We find ourselves in a space of COVID-19 where we have actually been physically separated from each other. And now love has taken on a whole new meaning. What it means to love and know each other has taken on a whole new meaning. So Jesus not only points out the problem, but Jesus points his way to a solution for them. And it's represented by 3 words: remember, repent, and do. You know, we learn to love in relationship, and we learn to unlove in relationship. And both of them we do intentionally and over time. So Jesus points the way back with those 3 words: remember, repent, do. So let's start with the first. Remember. Remember why it was you loved each other in the first place. Remember why it was you loved this community of faith in the first place. Remember that it was the love of God in those early, fresh years that brought you together. It was the love of God that enabled you to see. The love of God that became your filter for the way in which you dealt with the people and the communities around you. Remember how you felt before time and life got in the way of your best intentions. Then he said, repent. That word repent actually means look again. It means look again. It means turn again. It means consider again. Why? Because God is in the middle. And if God is in the middle of this space, he's saying, all right, look again. I'm going to give you a fresh set of eyes. Look again. And allow God's love to help you retrace your steps into that space of learning to love and learning to see and learning to be patient again. Remembering that God can take away that heart that you have and replace that heart. And then he said, do. He said, now that you've remembered, now that you've turned again, he said, do the first things that made you love. Do the first things that brought you joy. Do the first things that deepened your sense of commitment. The struggle that people have is not doing, but remembering why it was that they did and what drove that. And Jesus is saying, remember, repent, and do. Remember that Jesus wants you to do in that space, and that doing leads to you being rooted and grounded in love for Jesus. Jesus made it that simple because it's that hard. And he made it that hard so that we would get out of our own way and go to him and say, Lord, give us the heart that we need in order to remember, repent, and do. So if your first love for the things of God, if your first love for the people of God, and if your first love for each other and the people around you that you value so much and should place greater value on is waning, Jesus' words to you today, if you want to learn to love again, is remember, repent, and do.